All right. One of my favorite parts of my job is I get to nerd out in history, trying to find a good, like, opening story that really paves the way for something. So I get to learn about stuff. And I heard it said once that some people learn in order to teach, and some people teach in order to learn. And I definitely am one of the people that teach in order to learn because I like learning stuff. I'm a nerd by heart and I like diving into stuff. And I found a cool story. It's kind of like one of those iconic pieces of history that we all kind of know about, but I never dove into any of the details. So I thought it was a pretty cool story. I gotta show you this. It's the flying luxury cruise liner of the 1930s. Did you know there was such a thing? The flying luxury cruise liner of the 30s. There it is. It was called the Rigid Airship. It looks like a blimp, right? It's not a blimp because it's not a balloon. So this is a rigid airship. And Germany built these things and they kind of made it into the very first commercial airline company. They called them the Zeppelins. Notice the name now? The Zeppelins. That was the class. So the guy who invented it, his last name was Zeppelin. So if you're an inventor and you do something cool, I guess you get to name it after yourself. And he did that. So these were called the Zeppelins. By 1914, 1,500 flights were flown by about 10,000 people. Now, this is in an age where they didn't have a lot of travel options. There was people still on horseback at this time. Cars were introduced, but not to the amount that we have today. So there's some cars here and there. And so then World War II happens in the 30s, and Germany is like, wow, we got these huge airships. We can actually use them in the war. And they use these airships for scouting and for dropping bombs. So these were like the first bombers. And they were also used in the 1930s, non-wartime, for like some of the first transatlantic flights. So before you had to get on a cruise ship and like go across on a boat. But when they built these guys, they're starting to bring like commercial airliners across from like Germany to like New York and New Jersey and all that kind of stuff. They're taking people across the Atlantic Ocean for the first time through in the air. Small flight. These are the first ones that are taking like actual passengers across. During the 1930s, with the rise of the Nazi Party in Germany, they took hold of the Zeppelins and then they started slapping their symbols on them for that. But these things were huge and they weren't just warships, they were actually commercial airliners. Now, here's how big they are. Here's one compared to the Titanic. That was like a big boat, right? It was a luxury boat. So these are massive. The largest one was 804 feet long. That's really big. Like it's like almost three football fields long. So it's very similar in size to the Titanic. And it was filled inside the balloon thing. It was filled with 7 million cubic feet of hydrogen. That's a lot of hydrogen. So they filled those things up with hydrogen. They could float. And then there was engines that they slapped onto it. And they had 4,800 horsepower engines that just kind of like thrust the thing forward. It can go speeds of like 84 miles an hour. 84 miles an hour. That's actually not too bad because considering, the highway speed limit was 35 at the time. Going 84 miles an hour is pretty good. The Titanic, that went 28 miles an hour. Like that's how fast that thing was going. Now, some airplanes were able to get up to like 150, but they were loud school buses in the sky. And this thing was like a luxury cruise liner in the air. So everyone wanted to go on it. And in the 1920s, they started to bring these transatlantic flights across. In the early 30s, they like developed it into a commercial air business, and Zeppelins were the way to fly in style. They could fly 7,000 miles. That was their range. That's absolutely huge, considering that most planes, commercial planes of the day, only had like 1,000 miles on average. So 7,000 miles was an absolute feat. This was a technological like wonder, and it could hold 72 people, which doubled the amount that a commercial airliner could carry at the time. And it had way more style. Like um, it had like a luxury dining room. It was like a train or a cruise ship in the sky. It had other features I'll show you in a minute here, but the largest airship was called the Hindenburg, which had 63 flights completed. 17 of them were transatlantic over, and it carried 3,500 passengers and 66,000 pounds of freight in its career, flying around. And a ticket, if you wanted to fly on this thing, a ticket was going to cost you in today's money somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000 a ticket. So this was the luxury liner to fly. Now, they were filled with 7 million cubic feet of hydrogen. Here's the smoking room. Does anyone see a problem? I don't see a problem. Let's have lots of open flames in a thing that is carrying 7 million cubic feet of flammable hydrogen. I see no problems here. What could possibly go wrong, right? Well, there was reported engineers were looking at the Hindenburg, and there was some reported gas leaks through the whole hull of the rigid airliner, and multiple engineers were saying, "Ah, guys, like we gotta like do some stuff." And also, there was some static electricity that would just kind of like pop and charge and go off. Static electricity charges were going off, and nobody listened to the engineers. The engineers are saying, "We got a problem, guys. Like." Air leaks or gas leaks and static electricity charges in something that carries 7 million cubic feet of flammable gases probably is not going to end well. Well, but they were thinking, no, we're totally fine because we've completed 17 transatlantic flights, never had a problem. Well, the very last flight of the Hindenburg kind of is well known. You know the picture, right? Um, on May 6, 1937, as it's docking in New Jersey from a transatlantic flight, a small gas leak combined with some static electricity charges caused it to catch fire. And in 34 seconds, the whole airship was engulfed in flames on live radio. So everyone says this is a technological marvel. It's amazing. It's coming to New Jersey. And there was a guy like covering it on the radio. TVs were not, they were here and there, but most people just listened to radio in the 30s. So there wasn't on live TV, it was on live radio. People were listening to it like, wow, here comes the Hindenburg, and they're listening. And just within a couple of seconds, this announcer was trying to communicate to the listeners what he's seeing because it happened so fast. All of a sudden, there was a flame, and then all of a sudden, 34 seconds, the whole airship is engulfed in flames. The broadcaster, Herbert Morrison, um, kind of just trying to verbalize for his audience, but also like being horrified by what he's seeing, coined the term, "Oh, the humanity." Have you ever heard that term before? Like that is a common phrase. That's where it came from. I don't know if it was used often, but this is kind of like the moment where it like solidified into our minds. So if you've ever heard the phrase, "Oh, the humanity," whether in jest or whatever, this is where that phrase comes from because the guy is watching the things go up in flames before his eye on live radio, and he's trying to sum it up for his listeners. Now, of the 36 passengers and 61 crew aboard, 13 passengers and 22 crew passed away, as well as one member of the crew on the ground, for a total of 36 lives were lost on that. And that abruptly ended Zeppelin passenger travel. It was done after that. Nobody wanted to get on a Zeppelin after that. So after 100 and I think 124 seconds, it was on the ground and the flames were gone. It was that fast. So, I mean, if you think about it, just think about it. This luxury airship is gliding across the sky. It's the size of nearly 3 football fields in the sky. You have to pay 10 grand to get on it. It's just this marvel of human engineering. And everyone is saying, wow, this is amazing. But the engineers are like, oh, is today the day? I'll get messed up. Like, is this going to happen today? And it happened that day. And in less than 34 seconds, the Hindenburg went from this marvel of human engineering to a blazing wreck on the ground, lives lost, tragedy. And the term, "Oh, the humanity," was coined in that moment. Now, in Isaiah's world, he's like those engineers. He's on the inside of kind of the nation of Israel. He's kind of got a political position called prophet, which is they had religious and political stuff together, all meshed up together. So he had a political and religious role in their people, and he's on the inside, and he's saying, "We got some problems here, guys. I'm noticing some things that are happening, and I foresee something bad that's about to happen, and I we could change some things, right?" So Isaiah is looking at injustice and oppression and corruption throughout the whole thing. He sees it from the inside, and he decided to take himself off mute and say, "I got to say something, because if I don't say something, there's a blazing wreck right on the horizon. I got to speak about it." Isaiah 5 is kind of him calling out some warning signs, exposing what he sees and saying, this is not good. And that he challenges them. We need to change before disaster hits. That's what Isaiah is trying to do in this passage in Isaiah 5. And it starts off beautiful. Let me sing you a love song. And then that love song is like, "Oh, this is pretty. This is oh." It just like goes south fast. So Isaiah like captures their attention. I'm gonna give you a poem or a love song about from God to us. And then all of a sudden it goes south fast. And everyone's like, "Wait a second. What in the world is he talking about? I thought he was gonna sing us a love song about how great and awesome we are." And he was like, I don't think so. I got some news for you. We got some problems on the horizon. So that's Isaiah's role. He's on the inside trying to expose the things that he sees are going to bring some really harsh consequences very soon. So it starts off in Isaiah 5, 1 through 7, our passage from today. We'll look at the kind of the broader passage of Isaiah 5. But it starts off like this beautiful poem or a love song from God to God's people. "I will sing a song to my beloved." Like this is classic Song of Solomon's kind of stuff. And they're like, "Oh, I remember this song. Yeah, this is a good one. I remember this is good. Bring it on." And then it just goes into this efforts of God building this vineyard. And they're like, "All right, this is going to be a good one." And then it just goes south from there. Now, we don't really understand like the symbolism of the vineyard so much as they did. But there's a lot of symbolism here that we're going to miss. So God's like, "I'm planting this vineyard. I'm building these buildings. I'm putting this stuff around. And I can't wait for the grapes that come out of this vineyard. It's going to be great." And then it wasn't. But a vineyard is a symbol to these people of many different things. Now remember, they are farmers. This is an agricultural society. Like we live in a capitalistic society. We have an entirely different governing economic system than these people did. Their whole lives were built around farming, getting enough food to survive and maybe growing some extra for neighbors and selling them around, or animals. There's a little bit of trade that happened in small towns and things like that. But the vineyard had a specific role in a agricultural society. It was a symbol of economic prosperity because it took a very long time to establish a vineyard. Have you looked at like, "I think I'll grow fruit trees in my yard," and then you go buy a fruit tree and you put it out, and then the next year you're like, "There's no apples." Like, my dad got me and my mom, they got me for my birthday in 2014 an apple tree, and I planted it. And the first year it had this big apple on it, and I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be good. Next year we're gonna get nothing." I was like, "Oh, I guess it takes a while for it to establish itself and then start bearing some fruit." Next year after that, two apples. The deer got them. I was like, "All right." The year after that, I got one before the deer. I was like, it grew up high, so they couldn't reach it. I could. So I grabbed it. It tasted awful. Like, it's like, "Oh man, this is not a good apple tree." And then years, now here we are, like, I think 2014 to now, what is that? 11 years? 11 years later, math is not my strong suit. 11 years later, there's about 50 apples on the tree. I don't know what they're going to taste like, if they're going to be good, but they're there, and the deer can't reach them all. So it took some time to establish a vineyard. Like you had to grow it, and then you had to like cultivate it. It was long-term investment, planting, cultivating, building infrastructure. That's all spelled out in these verses. Like God has planted this vine, and now he's cultivating the vine. You got to grow along these trellises, and we're going to need presses, and we're going to need, you when you build a vineyard, you don't just grow grapes and go out and eat grapes. Like you're going to press it into wine because that's the only way to preserve the grapes. You're going to make it into wine. So there's all of the stuff to make grapes into wine are going to be there. So it's a symbol of economic prosperity. Like this person with this vineyard, like they're well established. They've been there a long time. They've been growing these vineyard like vines. It's good. So that was a symbol of economic prosperity. It was a symbol of social longevity. It meant that you stayed in one place for a long time, which means that you weren't driven out by war. And in this age, 800 years BC, there was a lot of warfare. There was a lot of tribal warfare, like people struggling over which land is going to be whose. And like now we got like nations and maps and lines and all that kind of stuff. Back then it was just like whoever like could just take it could take it. So it was very unstable. If you had a vineyard, that meant that you were in that place for a long time. You're not driven out by war. It means that you were probably handed that vineyard down from generation to generation to generation as an inheritance, and it's well established. So social longevity, that's a good deal to these folks. That means political stability, because that meant that the person that was in charge was leading the nation well, that they're available and invited to gain wealth and prosperity, like all were could do that, and you had opportunity to do that, and you took advantage of that, and it happened, so you had that stability that was there. You see all the stuff this vineyard just represents? It also meant religious identity. So it symbolized how they understood themselves also. Like they understood themselves that we are the people that God has planted in this land, and we have prospered and we have had safety and we've experienced stability, and this is good. So it was their religious identity, like God has blessed us because look at this vineyard here. But also it was the thing that held community together. It was the core principle that kept it functioning as God intended, was the exercise of justice. That was the core principle that kept their communities all functioning properly, was this idea of justice. Because once wealth and power started to accumulate in fewer and fewer people, then injustice started to flourish and community started to break down. And this is why God was very, very much passionate about this idea of justice, because that's the only way to keep a people together, was to have justice amongst them. And humans do this by nature, but it's like, oh, I have a little bit, I can get a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. When that little bit more comes at the expense of the people in your community, and then you rise higher and higher and get more powerful, more powerful, more powerful, then all of a sudden stuff goes south. This is where God starts saying, you missed something. Your community's unraveling. So after all this work and investment that God has done for these people, I planted you, I tended to you, I've done all this good stuff for you, and like I got sour grapes out of the deal. So verse at the end of verse 2, God's like, I got these rotten sour grapes. I can't do anything with this. Like, what am I supposed to do with this? I did it all right. Why? This is God's complaints through the prophet Isaiah. He's like, I did it all right, and my plans failed. Like I was trying to do this thing, establish a people that would have this justice amongst them that was so attractive that other people of the world would come and say, teach us how to live like you guys live, because this is great. This is so like, it's wonderful how you all live here. Teach us to do that. He's like, that was my plan. And it all centered around this idea of justice. And when there was injustice at the core of it, and certain people started to accumulate more and more and more, and then took it from the people, and they had less and less and less, all the problems started. And God said, I did it all right. Why did I get this result? I might as well just tear it all down. So that's kind of the harsh language that Isaiah makes use of for this vineyard. That would be like that's really harsh to say. Like a vineyard that's been handed from generation to generation to generation, and all of a sudden you're like, these grapes aren't very good. Let's burn it to the ground. Like it's like shocking to hear this kind of a response. Now you got to remember that Isaiah is a poem. And so a poem, we're not going to pick up on kind of the word plays that happen in there, and there's some fun stuff. What harvest was God expecting, and what harvest did God get? This is supposed to be communicated here in this piece of poetry with a lot of rhyming. And there's a cadence to it that we're going to miss in the English language. but there's some fun plays on words. God, the grapes that God was expecting, he was expecting this thing called justice out of it. Whereas it wasn't be a community where a bunch of people gathered a whole bunch of stuff at the expense of someone else. And then he's like, what I expected was justice, but what I got was bloodshed. That sounds like a weird like comparison, doesn't it? Justice and bloodshed. But in the Hebrew language, it's fun. What they do here, justice is the word mishpat with a hard T on the end. And it means fairness. Like this is the fair society. Things are fair here. But what I got instead was bloodshed. And the word there is mishpash. So you can see the poetry usage here is fun. It means to outpour. And what he's saying here is that there's um, I expected mishpat, I got mishpash. And you can see here, it's fun. There's this one letter difference in the Hebrew language I highlighted up there. Now, Hebrew reads that side this way. What is that? Left, left, to right, to left, right to left. So the first letter is over that way, and you read this way. So it's the last letter in the word. Is the difference change here? It's interesting. Now Walter Brueggemann, who's probably like the N.T. Wright of the Old Testament, he said this in his commentary on it. The term bloodshed means outpouring. Thus, the outpouring of life blood through exploitive social practices, slowly bleeding the poor to death, is what is meant here. The bloodshed that concerns the poet is not thuggery and murder, but the more subtle, slower, but equally decisive killing through economic policy against the vulnerable and the resourceless. Well, dang, that's what he says God is not happy about. And then he does another wordplay. That's fun. He does here, I expected righteousness, but I got outcry. Righteousness and outcry. I don't see like the comparison there, but righteousness is the word tzedakah, and it means equity. It means everyone's got a shot, everyone's got a chance, no one's got a leg up over anybody else. That's what the word righteousness means, not a holy, better, holier than thou kind of a thing. He expected tzedakah and he got outcry, which is sayaka. So in the Hebrew language, my pronunciation's probably way off. But there's one letter difference here as well. What he got was protests. The people outcried and they said no. Now, Walter Brueggemann goes on and he says this. God expected righteousness, that is equitable, generative social relations, but instead Israel produced outcry, that is feeble social protests of those who are victimized by rapacious social policy. Using terms that are brutally concrete in asserting that Israel has completely reneged on the most elementary social relations between the powerful and the powerless. This book was written in 1994. Walter Brueggemann, he just passed away this past year. Very smart man, understands all the Hebrew poetry, all the Hebrew texts, and his commentary on Isaiah has been so eye-opening. So this is what God expected. Justice got bloodshed, righteousness got outcry. And that's not some like holier than thou holiness that you have, but I expected fairness and equity amongst my people. And instead, I got an outpouring of blood, and the people are crying out, saying, no more, this can't happen. Whew. That's what Isaiah 1 through 7 is saying. Now, I like what James Cone said. The gospel of Jesus is not a rational concept to be explained in a theory of salvation, but a story about God's presence in Jesus' solidarity with the oppressed, which led to his death on the cross. What is redemptive is the faith that God snatches victory out of defeat, life out of death, and hope out of despair. That's kind of the core of this Old Testament prophetic tradition coming into the story of Jesus. And the reason I think that so much evil can be done in the name of God throughout all of human history is precisely because when the powerful co-opt God, then they can turn this thing, instead of a way of living, into an idea. And if you turn God into an idea, then it becomes a philosophy to master, a theology to dominate, or a theory to understand. And then if you have that theory in your head and someone else doesn't, then it's like, well, let me tell you all about this. Let me show you all about this. Let me teach you all about this. And God is not merely an idea, or it can be a social construct, like a mode of behavior control, a way of excluding some and promoting some. a hierarchy of those who are blessed and those who are cursed, those who are included, those who are excluded, all based on your behaviors or something. Or it can be a hierarchy. So it can be an idea, it can be a behavior, or it can be a hierarchy to promote themselves. Those who master the theology, theory, and social constructs, then they become blessed by them. And then they assume that that blessing comes from God. And then those who don't are the cursed ones, and they assume those cursings come from God. And then they need to be the avenue through which blessings flow from God to the curse. And then all of a sudden you've set up a hierarchy of religious control. And the blessing, cursing construct becomes the justifier of all kinds of evil injustices done in the name of God throughout all of human history. But Isaiah 5 is calling out this oppressive religious system built by powerful people at the expense of regular folks like us who are just on the ground. And he's saying that actually don't work, guys. So he starts off with this poetry, and it's like beautiful. And it's like, oh, I love the way that sounds. And then it turns real fast. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, that went south real fast. Now, verses 8 through 25 are a collection of woe unto yous. Not woe unto yous, but the yous that are here in this. Jesus is kind of picks up this, and in Matthew, he uses like Isaiah's things, and he does some woes unto the Pharisees. So it's a little more commentary on the specific things that these folks have done to earn such a flaming response. I'm just going to tear down my vineyard. I'm done with it. So we have 6 woes, and woe is a religious word for shame. It's kind of communicated in Mulan by the dragon when he says, dishonor on your whole family, dishonor on you, and dishonor on your cow. If you've ever seen Mulan, you're chuckling. There's one. All right, I got one. To pronounce a woe on those who had it, all the blessings, was absolutely radical. They're like, what are you talking about? We're woe on us. We have all the stuff. We have all the blessing. We're on the inside. This is great. So these are the folks who have prospered under the systems that were built for them, the ideas, the social constructs, and the hierarchies. And the assumption is that God has given them those blessings. So to hear a woe thrown at them when they assume that God has blessed them with all this good stuff, that was just like, what's going on here? Remember, Isaiah is on the inside. He sees it from the inside, and he becomes like this whistleblower for what he sees. And then he decides to take himself on mute and say something. So not just that this is wrong, but this is wrong and is going to lead to this crash in our near future. So what are those woes? These are fun. The first woe is this, to those who join house to house and field to field until there's room for no one. That's the first woe. So this is basically those who buy up all the land and houses, leaving the poor without a place to farm for their livelihood, thus destroying communities. This set up an unbalanced system of lords and serfs and oligarchs and poors and owners and renters, and destroying the fabric of communal life together. They got and got and got and got. So that was the very first woe that he said. It's like, because these people relied on the land. They lived on the land. If you didn't have land, it's like we don't have a grocery store. Like how are we going to get our food? How are we going to survive? How are we going to live? And when it broke up and the people who had money, they're like, well, I think I'll get another piece of property and another piece and another piece and another piece. And then it pushed the poor out of their ability to provide for their own livelihoods. And God's like, there's problem one right there. The second one says, those who rise early in the morning in pursuit of strong drink. Now, is this, as the Baptists would say, like, see, I told you alcohol's a sin. It's actually not. They're living on a vineyard. What do you make at a vineyard? There's only one thing to make on a vineyard. You're not passing out grapes. They're going to go bad, really. They're not making raisins. They make wine. So now remember, the first woe is those who bought up all the land so that the poor had nowhere to farm and live. Second one is those who absorb the resources of the land and then practice unregulated self-indulgence at their neighbor's expense. So this is not something that says alcohol is bad. This is something where it says if your whole life is you get to sit around sipping on wine while you watch all your serfs work for you, like probably not the best thing. Like he's like, yo, go do this, go do that, go do this, go do that. And then he's like, I wake up early, I have nothing to do with my life except drink all the wine that these people are making for me. So it's not an indictment against alcohol, it's an indictment against this injustice of soaking up all the people's land and then making them work their land, but then give you the produce from it. That was something that they didn't like. Drag iniquity along with cords of falsehood, who drag sin along as with a cart rope. Now, this is in a society where there's not a lot of tools, like power tools and stuff. You had like, you know, if you could carry a lot of stuff, you become industrious. Those who become very productive, you know, like I can wrap up a whole bunch of sticks in a cord and carry more sticks. I'm more productive. So if you are, this is Tim saying, not those people who sin a lot, like say a lot of cuss words. No, not talking about that. These are those who carry a lot of things at once. That's productivity. So they're when you systemize oppression of poor people and then you get really productive with how much you can make off the backs of those in your servitude, that's what he's talking about. You're very productive at oppressing those people. And that's probably not good for you. Three woes. We're halfway there. Next woe. Those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness. This is those who package injustice created by selfishness and saying, oh, this prosperity is great. I'll just do more and more and more. So those who package injustice created by selfish short-term prosperity that hurts the community, and they say, no, this is a good thing. This is what God wants. God wants me to absorb all the resources and for you to have nothing. Those who call evil good and good evil. And he's like, if you can package all of that systemic injustice that we're talking about into a package that says actually God condones and blesses this, he's like, that's the fourth woe. And then the fifth woe, those who are wise in their own eyes and shrewd in their own sight. Now, this one is a little bit sneakier. Those who are above community, autonomous and prosperous, not needing communal, conventional wisdom. Now, in a world where individualism is not like a thing, that didn't become a thing until the Romantic era of like the 1600s. And then we started to think about me as an individual, but your identity was wrapped up in your community. And if those who are wise in their own eyes, they don't need the rest of the community's opinions and wisdoms and cultures and practices and all that. It's like, no, I'm good, man. I've got all the resources. So that means I've got all the wisdom and I don't need to listen to anybody else. I'm great. So it's those who see themselves as above their communities around them. And they don't need to be in submission to the culture and community of a collected people. There's no wisdom and no accountability. And then the last woe is to those who acquit the guilty for a bribe and deprive the innocent of their rights. So this is those like self-indulgent rich people who can buy their way through the court systems at the expense of the poor. And it kind of twists the justice system in their favor. And then the poor run into the courtroom and they're like, nope, you're just going to jail. And then the rich come into the courtroom and they're like, well, hello, sir. What can I do for you today? You have a bribe for me? Right? Like it's somebody who has enough money that they don't need to worry about the laws and the court systems because they can purchase their way through it, and the poor are going to encounter it and in its full brunt. And so those who become so powerful that they're too big to fail, not subject to communal wisdom and communal ethics, and can grease their way through and agreed upon corporate rules and standards using their wealth and their position as a way to get through it. Those are the six woes, and they're basically very concrete things that God is saying, these are what you all did that I'm upset about, and it's headed to disaster. And this is what Isaiah is trying to highlight for them because he's on the inside. He sees it, and he's trying to highlight it for them. And he's saying, you see all those people out there, all those farmers, all the poor people, all the people who don't have all the knowledge and riches and possessions and land and all that you do, they're the ones that are hurting the most. And they're the ones that are suffering at the expense of what you're calling a great God prosperous thing. So Walter Brueggemann said this, the poetry presents a society that has lost its center, its reference, its focus, its purpose, and its chance for well-being. Thus, the woes are followed by two abrupt, heavy, harsh, prophetic therefores, voicing Yahweh's negative resolve. And those therefores are pretty much like, well, I guess there is no choice left but to tear down the vineyard because I'm not getting what I wanted out of the vineyard. Now, this is not a it's bad to be rich kind of a message that Isaiah's doing. He's saying it's bad to use your prosperity in such a way that unravels the fabric of your community values while saying God endorses this while you do it. That's specifically what he's going into. He's not saying it's bad to be rich or it's bad to own property or it's bad to be, have a rental property or something like that. He's not saying any of those things. He's saying It's bad to unravel the social fabric of your community by going against the values of the usness that we are, and then saying that this is the way that God wants it. And so those two things are, you rejected me, so therefore I'm rejecting you and I'm checking out. And that was a big deal. That was a huge deal. Now, these are heavy passages, Isaiah 1, Isaiah 5. And in the middle was actually a passage of hope, because poetry does that. It'll like take you to the depths of like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And then it'll bring this beautiful poetic thing. So I thought I'd ravel in here a passage from Isaiah 2 and Isaiah 4 that shows that in between 1 and 5 that we talked about, those woes and the yikes passages, there is a lot of hope. It's not all doom and gloom. In the middle is it goes like poetry takes you from oh crap to oh I can't wait, this is gonna be great, and it goes back and forth. We just did the oh crap sections 1 and 5, but chapters 2 and 4 teach us how to see hope in the midst of the oh crap, this is bad stuff. So this is one of those passages. In days to come, on the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established as the highest of the mountains. All the nations shall stream to it. Many people shall come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, that he may teach us his ways and that we may all walk in his paths. This is a picture of hope that is given right out of Isaiah 2 or 4. I can't remember which one. I forgot to put it on there. Now, holy places were always on mountains because they were closer to the sky where the rain came from and watered your crops so you wouldn't die of starvation. So they always liked things higher up. And the Holy Temple in Jerusalem was actually built on a mountain, and you would ascend the mountain of the Lord on Passover, and that you would sing songs on your way up there. Now, the many people coming to the mountain to learn the ways of the Torah in an age of tribal warfare, disputed national boundaries, and threats of invasion from adversaries, that's this, you don't hear that stuff back in this day. If somebody showed up on your doorstep, a whole nation, that was a bad thing because they probably had weapons. And so this is a different kind of a vision here of everyone's showing up on your doorstep, but not to take your stuff, but to learn, how did you do that? Like, how did you gather your people in such a way that everybody's happy and blessed and prospering? Teach us how to do that. And they're going to say, oh, our God taught us how to do that. Let me tell you about this God, kind of a thing. So they're not becoming because they're forced or because they're coerced. They're not coming to dominate and defeat. They're coming out of their own free will, attracted to this people that seem to have this well-being thing down and mastered, and they want to know the secret. Now that passage goes on to say this, for out of Zion shall go forth instruction, he shall judge between the nations and shall arbitrate for the peoples. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. There is a fun Southern black spiritual, ain't gonna study war no more. We've sang it a couple times based on this verse here. Instruction is another word for Torah, the laws that were given to the people, and it was a way to live in community together in peace and mutual well-being. That's what they were aiming for. The nations arriving at the gates are not hostile, but humble, willing to learn the ways of peace that Israel has mastered. It is so attractive that all technology and infrastructure no longer rotate around warfare. Like you think about it, metallurgy and blacksmithing, it was all about making weapons, better weapons. You know, went from Iron Age to Bronze Age, all that kind of stuff. It's like, or bronze to iron. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh, like, wow, this is, we don't have to use all of our technology and infrastructure for the war machine. We can actually use it for the farm machine. We don't need swords anymore. What are we going to do with these swords? Because nobody wants to like kill each other anymore. What are we going to do with our swords? Well, we'll give them to the blacksmiths and they'll turn them into plows and you can farm. Farming, member, is a symbol of stability and prosperity. It's like I am on this piece of property, no one can take it from me, and I can farm the land and earn my way through this world. And it was all that was all based on the manna principle that was in the desert. And the manna was that God gave the people manna. Nobody was allowed to take more than 1 day's worth or it would rot, except for on Sabbath, you take 2 days worth. And this was the overriding principle. And it's the core of the Lord's Prayer. Give us this day our daily bread. Like this is the bread we need for today. That's all we need. And If I'm not going to try and get all of the bread all in my storehouse and then make everyone come to me to get the bread. But no, because if I do that with the manna, the stuff that I collected would turn to rot. It would just go bad. So this is kind of the core principle that they were to learn in the desert, that they then were to apply when they got to their land. And then they forgot about it. And then all of a sudden they're hoarding and harvesting the manna together, and it became a bad deal. So, the love of our neighbor is the only door out of the dungeon of self. George MacDonald, that was C.S. Lewis's mentor. I thought that was a wonderful way. When faith becomes a theoretical idea or a personal possession instead of a way of living in community with those around us, then all of a sudden it turns into a weapon in the hands of the powerful to become more powerful, a tool in the hands of the wealthy to become more wealthy, a fence around those who belong, cutting off those who don't. And Isaiah is good news for the poor and the cast out, because it says that you are not there because God put you there, but because someone else did it. And that's an exercise of injustice, not in line with God's core principle of justice. And God's not okay with that. And God's not cool with that. So if you've ever had faith or any kind of spirituality, scripture, Christianity weaponized against you by someone higher up than you or whatnot, that's exactly the thing that Isaiah is calling out and saying that's not what this is about. This is about, like, you all have a connection to God that nobody can mess with. You all have it. You can experience God on a walk out in your farming. You can experience God at your work. Nobody can take that from you. God is like dwelling in you, and you have a wisdom, a way of understanding God from your own perspective that nobody else has. And that when we all get together in community, we're an expression of all those things together. And it's not about a hierarchy of those who understand and know and behave well and then those who don't, but all of a sudden a wisdom that comes together from community that holds us together and says, let's not damage the fabric of the things that bring us together and hold us together, because every single soul in this room is a part of this thing that God is making, and nobody has the monopoly on it. That's what Isaiah is trying to help us see. And I hope that you see that. And I hope that you have the confidence in your own relation with God to know that. And to nobody can push you on the outside and erect a fence and say, oh, you didn't believe correctly or behave correctly, or all of a sudden you're on the outside of things. That's not what this is about. You have a connection, and then you have to figure out how to hold that connection, that belief, that value system in a way that keeps us all together in a loving community of well-being together. That's what God is aiming for. And that's what Isaiah said. Y'all missed that part there, and something bad is going to happen, because it unravels the fabric of the things that hold us together. So hold that confidence. Now, a couple of reflection questions. Where have I assumed my exclusion was God's doing? I like that question, because we can just automatically in our insecurities assume that. Where have I reduced faith into an idea instead of a way of life? Who would receive these woes today, and why? And then a spiritual practice this week. Practice prophetic noticing. Each day, write down one instance of injustice you see or hear about. Reflect prayerfully on how you can respond with voice, action, or support. All right, our benediction today is Psalm 80. I'll invite our musicians back up for a closing hymn while I read this. Lord, hear our sighs and bring us swift release, for we have nothing left to us but tears, no light, no joy, no strength, no health, no peace. Only the strife, the dread, the strain, the fears of these dark times. Oh, turn to us again. Show us once more the mercy of those years when you were forming us. Remember when you called us out of exile, planted us as your own vineyard. Was it all in vain? The way you tended us and nurtured us that we might bear good fruit in joy and peace. We have borne bitter fruit, but come to us and help us start again. Come and release with your right hand the grace we have refused, till shadows flee at last and sorrows cease. Psalm 80, retold by Malcolm Guite. Amen.